So much smoke. Oh my goodness. Hey everyone, Digital David here. Today in this video, I'm going to be checking out the YEYIAN Odachi Gaming PC. This is a sponsored video by YEYIAN, but I want you to know that any opinion expressed in this video is strictly my own. That being said, if you're interested in this desktop computer or you want to find out more about it, the link to it will be in the video description. Take a look at the retail box and packaging. Got a nice fragile sticker front and center. This PC is available in at least 9 configurations at the time of this video. The one we have here features the AMD. This is the 7950X 3D CPU, and we have an RTX 4090 with 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, 2 terabyte NVMe Gen 4, Windows 11 Bluetooth, 1000-watt power supply. You get the idea. Now let's go ahead, let's open it up and look at the contents. Here are all the contents. First up, we have our Asus Wi-Fi antenna here, followed by our power cord for the computer. And lastly, we have the computer itself. I want to point out really quickly, they did a great job shipping this PC. It was in a box within a box, jam-packed full of a lot of packing peanuts, and they had the inflatable airbag on the inside, keeping all of those components safe during shipping. Now let's look at the PC up close. Looking at the top of the case, you'll see we have a removable and magnetic mesh cover and filter. You'll also see all of our control buttons: power button, reset button, USB, mic jack, headphone jack, USB, USB Type-C, and LED. Looking at the front panel here, you'll notice we have a mesh cover that's going to reveal our built-in RGB cooling fans once illuminated. The front panel is removable. Just pull up from the bottom right here with your hand. That's going to reveal our 3 YEYIAN RGB cooling fans right there for some nice fresh air intake. Here's a look at the bottom. Again, there's the handle where you can pull off the front panel. You'll see we have a removable filter and screen right here. Different mounting options down at the bottom. You'll see those 4 screws there and the 4 feet for this case. They're nice and wide. Looking at the back side of the case, you'll see our exhaust fan. We have our motherboard I/O with legacy connectors, plenty of USB, 2.5 gig LAN, Wi-Fi, audio, DisplayPort, and HDMI. Moving right along, you'll see we have our PCI slots right here with our GPU already installed. Again, this is the 4090. This case does have vertical mounting support as well too, which is cool. And at the very bottom, we have our 1000-watt power supply here, toggle on and off switch, power plug connector. Looking at the back side of the case, you'll see on our back side panel, we do have the YEYIAN logo and branding embedded in this case. Let's go ahead, let's remove this panel and see the cable management. All right, so the backside looks great. They did a good job with the cable management. CPU power coming right along here. You'll see our red extension cables, just like our main motherboard power there. A lot of it just tucked away at the bottom. That's fine. That's what it's there for. And then everything coming along this main channel here for our ARGB fan controller and hub, routed back to the motherboard or to our 3 intake fans on the front panel. Nice, neat, very well done. Now let's look at the front. The front of the case has a really nice tempered glass side panel that just slides up and out of the way, revealing all of the contents and components of our build. So we have 7 fans total. 4 are going to be YEYIAN fans. 3 are going to be the MSI fans that match the installed AIO. We have our Asus Prime Series X670 motherboard and an Asus TUF Gaming GeForce RTX 4090 here. XPG DDR5, XPG power supply. Everything looks great. Massive, massive GPU. Holy smokes, that thing is a big boy. But the build looks nice. We got the silver, the black accents with the little red splashed in there. Beautiful GPU. Nice cutout for the power supply. So you get the idea here. Everything looks great. In regards to cable management, they did a nice job. There's a little bit that I think we could touch up, but it's also really hard to get your hands in there, so I understand how they left things the way that they did. Same with some of the cables at the bottom there. It's going to be hard to notice or see unless you look at it with a really critical eye. But let's go ahead, let's boot this thing up. PC's powered on. First attempt was successful to boot the PC. I wanted to show you the fans with the lights off to see how bright they are. Take a look at the 3 fans glowing through the front panel mesh there. Pretty sweet. You'll see the back exhaust fan. Then we have our RAM, our GPUs lit up, our cooler, and if I tip it back, you'll see the fans up at the top. And here's a close-up look with the tempered glass side panel removed. Ooh. There's the exhaust fan. The MSI logo on the cooler, the RAM illuminated. Backside look at the 3 front panel fans there. Our GPU, RGB there. 3 fans up top, and then a peek in the front. And we have 2 indicator lights up at the top. Looks really nice. And just for fun, let's cycle through all the different LED options and effects using the control button up at the top. We'll keep clicking them. I do want to point out that the 3 MSI fans are not changing with the 4 YEYIAN fans. So I do wish that they would have swapped those fans out and made everything compatible here. That's just my OCD. That bothers me. Might not bother you. The effects look nice though. Great that you have that right at your fingertips, maybe depending on the mood, game, aesthetic you have. You can tweak those. But look, a lot of different options. We're not even through them all yet. Nice pulsing and cycling through the different colors. And now we're back to our RGB rainbow there. So not bad, really easy, 1-button push controls to configure the RGB. If you're not familiar, YEYIAN makes gaming accessories and peripherals for your computer. So you'll see right here, we have a nice gaming mouse that we're using, complete with RGB. Wow. We have a mechanical keyboard that we're using, also complete with RGB and blue switches. And you'll see they have a nice all-in-one streaming microphone kit right here, and you can't forget about their computer monitors as well. Upon initial boot, this is the desktop you're going to be taken into when everything loads. It boots very quickly. You'll see that we have our YEYIAN background here on the desktop, and we have GeForce Experience and Armory Crate installed. The good news is I couldn't find any additional bloatware besides things like Microsoft Office and Spotify that come pre-installed with Windows 11, so that's great. Armory Crate is for our Asus motherboard, and GeForce Experience is for our GPU, our RTX 4090. Let's take a second. Let's talk about that included 2 terabytes of storage. Let's see how much usable space we actually have. So right out of the box, without anything else downloaded, updated, anything along those lines, we have 1.81 terabytes of usable space out of the 2 terabyte capacity, and we have 1.75 terabytes remaining. So in regards to performance, the drive that's installed is the Kingston NV2 drive. This is a Gen 4 drive with advertised read speeds up to 3,500 megabytes per second and advertised write speeds up to 2,800 megabytes per second. You'll see the results that we got here using Crystal Disk Mark. We actually exceeded the advertised speeds, which is great. We got over 3,700 megabytes per second read and 2,900 megabytes per second for our write speeds. In regards to ASSSD, another great benchmarking tool, you'll see our performance here is 3,100 for our read and 2,600 for our write, well within range and performance for this particular drive. Forget about the SSD, let's talk about the CPU, the whole brains of this computer. So this features the AMD Ryzen 9 7950X3D, a 16-core, 32-thread CPU supporting DDR5 and PCIe 5.0. Here's a quick look at CPU-Z. Feel free to pause the screen at any time to learn more about the CPU. We'll click through the other tabs. Here's our motherboard, our memory information, our SPD if you want to look at that, our graphics for our 4090. Then we have our bench score right here for both single thread and multi-thread. Let's see how that compares to the competition. So on the single thread chart, here's the 7950X right here coming in at 767. So that's trading blows with the 12700, 12600, below the 12900. And then at the very top, you'll see we have the 13900 and the 13700K, but still well within range. I want to point out ours was technically 716, so that's showing right here in between, it looks like the 12700H and the 12900H, below just the regular 7700 from Intel, but still above the 5950X from AMD and the 5900. And looking at the multi-thread score, we're still below the Intel 13900 as you would expect, but we're right there. Our score is exactly where the 7950X that they benchmark is, but they got a higher score than we did. We were in the 14,000 range, but well above the previous generation 5950X from AMD. You'll see similar performance with our Geekbench test here. We're showing a single core score of 2183 and a multi-core score of 2249.9. Compared to the competition, well, you guessed it, with that single core score, we're showing that the 13900's up at the top, followed by the 7950X, then the 7700X, and then you'll see we have our 7950X 3D right here. Now keep in mind their score is a couple hundred points greater than the value that we got with our testing with this machine, but this still gives you a nice indicator of where it's going to rank compared to the competition from both within AMD as well as with Intel. Multi-thread tells a different story here. This is super interesting. We actually got a score greater than what they're showing in the benchmarking scoreboard. So we got a score of 22,499. So that's actually substantially higher than the highest score they have here for the 13900. So it's great to see that this CPU, whether it's single thread or multi-thread, is going to be at the top or exceeding the top in performance. It's really a powerful CPU for both gaming, streaming, content creating, video editing, anything you want to do with your computer that's CPU intensive. This is going to crush every task you throw at it. History repeats itself with our Cinebench R23 testing. We're showing a multi-core score of 34,830 and a single core score of 1885. We have an MP ratio of 18.47. Here's a quick peek at some CPUs that they compare it with. We're up at the top for our multi-core score. Same can be said for our single core score. Pretty substantial margins there. And then our MP ratio, we come in third place. Nano Reviews has a more exhaustive list. I like this one because they have more modern CPUs, more consumer-friendly options that you're probably encountering. And you'll see we're definitely at the top. The 13900 takes the first couple slots, followed by the 7950X and 7950X 3D, outpacing the 13700, the 7900X from AMD, but they're all well within range, battling it out with both single and multi-core scores. For you video editors out there, take a look at our Puget Bench scores. We got an overall score of 892. Let's see how that stacks up with the competition. So at the top of the list, you'll see the overall score of 1410. Again, this is for 7950X or 7950X 3D systems. Wanted to just see how we rank. Top one also has a 4090 GPU. You'll see 32 gigs of RAM. I'm thinking a lot of this too has to depend with our M.2 drive. So if we had a faster drive, I'm thinking we'd see similar results up here at the top. Maybe some extra RAM at a faster speed. Everything's all default with this currently. But there you go. We can scroll down and you'll see where we are. We're closer towards the bottom here on the first page, but we're still on the first page. Here's our ranking and build right here, but not bad. So we're slightly below a system that has way faster RAM, 6,000 megahertz, but a 4070 Ti. So really interesting to see some of the breakdown here. But we edge out a similar system with just the regular 7950X, same RAM speeds, but you'll notice they have an AMD GPU right there. And then if we don't filter by CPU, you'll see at the very top, the Threadripper Pro from AMD is getting that top score here, followed by, hey, you guessed it, the Intel 13900K CPU. The time has come for the moment you've all been waiting for, gaming. First up is Forza 5. We're using our YEYIAN monitor here that has a resolution of 3440 by 1440p and 165 Hertz for the refresh rate. Our 4090 knocked it out of the park with Forza 5. We averaged 210 FPS with a minimum of 187 FPS and a maximum of 204 40. So it really can crank it out at 1440p and beyond with this 21:9 aspect ratio monitor. Assassin's Creed yielded similar results again at 3440 by 1440p, 165 Hz with our monitor. We averaged 166 FPS with a minimum of 88 and a maximum of 297. Our lowest 1% value was 126 FPS and our lowest 0.1% value was 103 FPS. So you're probably seeing a pattern emerge here where we get into that mid and high 100 FPS value range depending on the game that we're playing. Borderlands 3 is the same way, where we averaged 178 FPS during gameplay. Playing Hitman 3, we averaged 159 FPS. Again, some of this can be tweaked higher or lower depending on what your resolution settings are. We had ours on the most extreme possible for all of our results here. And I want to point out that we could have turned on DLSS and some other NVIDIA specific features, but we left those out just so we could see what are we getting bare bones with our 4090, especially if you want to compare it to some AMD cards or AMD builds that wouldn't have DLSS and those other features. To make light of our gaming performance, let's dive into the nitty-gritty thermal performance and details of how all these parts and components in this case work together. So currently the computer's been on for a couple hours, just idling here in the studio. We're showing a CPU temp right now averaging at 51.8 degrees Celsius. Motherboard coming in at 56.6 degrees Celsius. DDR5, 45 and 43 degrees Celsius respectively. So let's just call it 44. And then we have our M.2 drive coming in at 47 degrees Celsius. And we have our GPU coming in at 38.5 degrees Celsius for our average. Now we're going to go ahead, we're going to stress everything out, the CPU and the GPU. We're going to have it running at everything max, and we'll see how warm this PC gets. All right, we've brought our CPU to its knees. We're torture testing it here with Cinebench R23 running. That's stressing out the CPU. We're using FurMark to stress out the GPU. We're also capturing the display with OBS. So you'll see the temps on screen, but basically in red, that's going to be our CPU hitting its max limit of 90 degrees Celsius. So we're definitely hitting that threshold there. Our motherboard coming in right around 58 degrees Celsius for our max. And then our DDR5's coming in anywhere between 53 and 51, depending on the stick. Our M.2 drive showing that we peaked at 52 degrees Celsius, and our GPU coming in at 70 degrees Celsius under that full load. A lot of warm air coming out the top, not as warm coming out the exhaust on the side. But let's go ahead, let's get the thermal camera out. All right, so here's our thermal cam, and this is going through the tempered glass. Look at the heat sources here. We'll go to the RAM. CPU, really interesting. It's not lighting up as much as the GPU. Definitely the source of heat right now in this build. And you'll see our exhaust there out the back. And then take a look up at the top. The radiator is glowing as it's exhausting out all that warm air as well. Again, substantially warmer just to touch the top with the air coming out versus the back rear exhaust. Here's a look at the rear exhaust fan. Power supply too. But a lot of heat. Now it's time for my favorite test, where we're going to inject some smoke into the PC. Currently, everything's still being stressed, so we have the GPU at 100% and the CPU, so we get a good feel for that airflow and how the smoke's going to move around in the case. So just visualize the smoke coming in as nice cool air and exhausting out as warm air. Look at that. That is awesome. So those triple fans up top really moving that air in and out right there. We're still seeing some come out the backside. We're injecting it into the lowest point too, so hopefully some of that can get picked up with that GPU. You'll see that. It comes right in for the GPU, just at a slight angle right by the RGB, and then it exhausts out. We'll go middle. Look at that. It's really, really, really flowing. And then top. And then maybe we can do a little bit out of the case, and you'll see here how it will draw that cool air in. So there's 3 fans pulling that air in. And just for fun, one more time, let's let it rip. So much smoke. Oh my goodness. Man, that's cranking that out of there. So it's time for me now to share my final thoughts. Keep in mind, this is basically me critiquing a Ferrari. This has a fantastic GPU, CPU, the build is nice, everything worked right out of the box. They did a great job packaging everything. They cable managed it very nicely, better than I even do, which isn't saying much, but they did a nice job here. I wasn't sure what to expect, honestly. But with this particular PC, there are a couple things I would want to see change. The first one is the 3 fans up at the top. So they're MSI fans, they match the cooler as you would expect, but I wish they would have swapped those out for more YEYIAN fans. So the LED button up at the top would control all the fans without having to use any extra software. Nobody has time to deal with that. So I was hoping something like this, when you're paying this much, those little things would be done just to make things easier for you, especially if you're somebody that likes to change the colors all the time. You would appreciate that. And then lastly, for me, if you're going to be using this for content creating and video editing, maybe over a server, you have a network attached storage, I wish we had 10 gig. They should give you dual Ethernet with this motherboard. It should be 2.5 and 10 gig. But if you're just going to use this for gaming, 2.5 is plenty. Maybe a couple extra USB ports as well if you want to use this for streaming, but we got 3 up top and we have multiples throughout the backside, so it's probably going to be enough for you, but you just can never have too much USB. So that's some of the things I'd like to see just critiqued a little bit, because again, at this price point, this is a premium computer. They need to be going all out, but they have not made any compromises with the CPU, the GPU, the RAM. The motherboard has great longevity too. The Asus board that they picked supports DDR5, and then we have PCIe 5.0 support as well for future generations of GPUs, and the primary M.2 slot supports Gen 5 too. So when those drives start to show up on the consumer side of things at an affordable price point, you'll be happy that in a couple of years you can get even faster speeds out of this machine.